The Chicago Bulls took a different direction this season when they've gone younger. And while there's a mixed bag of Bulls fans that think that this team is going to actually be competitive still this upcoming season, and where there's some Bulls fans who think the Bulls are going to absolutely stink this season, I'm going to talk about why the Bulls have made this move at the right time and that even if things go left, they could even still up winning. We're going to talk about all that, plus dive into the mailbag right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. So I want to talk about the calculated risk that the front office took. And I know a lot of people, we've talked about these things in bits and pieces, but I want to kind of pull it all together, kind of one overarching conversation about what this front office has done, right? I know that there are many Bulls fans, I won't say all, but many Bulls fans that if this team somehow misses out on keeping their top 10 pick, are going to say that this going younger is it's all a fail, right? And there's some Bulls fans that think that this team's going to be better. Some Bulls fans that think that this team's going to struggle. I sit somewhere in the middle, right? I think that this team could win about 35 games. I think that if everything congeals really well, and that we see players as well as take leaps and fit in really nicely, that maybe it could be more than that. But overall, I don't think this team is going to win too many games. Now, that's not to say that this team isn't going to be playing solid basketball and learning, but I also factor in the fact that we were a team that won 39 games and almost half of our games were clutch games last season. And a lot of our wins, I think it was 23 wins were clutch wins last season for a 39-win team, right? And so not having a player like DeMar DeRozan, who is what he is in the clutch, not to say that it was all him, because Kobe stepped up in a lot of those games in the clutch as well. But I'm just worried about that aspect of things and how the Bulls are going to fare in those situations. Now, when you look at what this team has built, right, what this front office has built with the roster, it seems like it's going to be a roster that we're gonna get out in transition. We're gonna play a much faster up-tempo pace if we can rebound well. And it's going to be a team where Josh Giddey is kind of giving the keys as the point guard, and players are going to have to learn how to operate off ball and move without the ball. And I think that's something that the Bulls have really struggled at over the last few years is movement off the ball. Is going to be something that seemingly we're going to try to push a little bit better. And I do think that, and I've said many times, it's going to be a fun, more exciting, more modern style of basketball that we have here. Josh Giddey, one of the better playmakers in the NBA, and the open shots he's able to generate for his teammates. And then, of course, you look at Ayo, Kobe. Those two players continue taking the step forward that they took last year. Ayo Dosunmu, even though moving from the starting lineup into the bench more than likely, is still going to get tons of minutes, but his role is actually going to kind of increase in many ways, as he's going to be the lead guard off the bench. He's going to be drawing a lot of important defensive assignments for the Chicago Bulls as well. And then Kobe. We're hoping that Kobe's going to take that next step, going from a player that averaged a little over 19 points per game last season to hopefully getting to 25 points per game. Now, Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic still being on this roster, of course, raises some questions on how that offensive balance is really going to be. But you're looking for that. Then you have exciting young players in Miles Buzelis and Julian Phillips, who really show that at least activity, energy-wise, they're going to be able to bring a whole hell of a lot for this team. And as a team that's kind of now missing two of its most energy-filled guys and guys that move without the ball, and Javonte Green and Alex Caruso, they're gone off this roster now. You're looking at kind of those guys stepping into those roles as being the guys that are constantly moving, that are going to get those energy plays, those highlight reel blocks, those dunks, those type of things that change the momentum of the crowd. And, of course, we're even hoping for more for Miles Buzelis in that time also. You got young players in Patrick Williams, Jalen Smith, who Bulls fans are hoping as well, playing with the point guard like Josh Giddey, and overall them taking a step, especially Patrick Williams in the added now responsibility that he's going to have, that he takes a step forward. So if everything works out for this Bulls team, this is a team that is going to make it fun, is going to make it interesting, and should play a more modern style brand of basketball and a more sustainable style as well. They may go through their ups and downs and their ebbs and flows, but you're hoping for that. Now, what if things go left? And that's kind of the thing that I want to focus on here. if things go bad for the Chicago Bulls, meaning, let's say Kobe and Ayo don't take a next step up. Let's say that the presence of Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic does negatively impact the growth from the young players. Or players like Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, Patrick Williams. They don't take the necessary steps that we're hoping to see from them to where they look like more competent players as well. The Bulls then still have a high probability of keeping their top 10 pick. And in a deep draft, that could be now, that would be a very big spin by the front office, and it would be a bit of coping to look at that, right? And it's not going to be a fun season if this Bulls team, if nothing ends up working. Let's say Josh Giddey comes in and he doesn't go back to what we saw at times in OKC Thunder when he actually had the ball in his hands. If we don't go back, if he doesn't go back to that, and all these things just don't work, or a combination of a few of these things don't work out, right? I'm not saying that they won't. I actually have faith that a lot of those things are going to work out, and my faith in Josh Giddey has continually risen the more I've become aware of him and looked at his tape and what he could bring to this team under a Billy Donovan coach system who, we know Billy Donovan, if you have a point guard playing at a high level, his system always looks much better. And so Kobe also not adapting to being off ball. Like, if there's that thing, there's a few things that go the favor of the Chicago Bulls. Hey, I already talked about the potential of keeping their top 10 pick. If this thing does blow up in the Bulls' faces, they have a shot at a generational talent, because there's a lot of them. Not generational, franchise-changing talent. That's the better word. Generational. Cooper Flagg's probably the only one that's projecting him, and Ace Bailey maybe. But you have a chance at a franchise-changing talent in the next draft that you can then say, hey, we gave these young guys a chance. It didn't work out. We're getting this top 10 pick. We got to make sure we get it right. And this guy's going to be the guy that we're hoping then we're starting to build around him, Modest Bucilis, because you're not going to make a decision on Modest just off one season, however that works out. But also, on top of that, you don't have long-term bad money in Kobe or Ayo. So let's say that they don't. Let's say that last season, and again, I'm not saying that this is how I feel. I'm just saying that in the case that this happens, let's say last season was a flash in the pan for Ayo Dosunmu and Kobe White, and they actually regress next season. Cool. You got one season left on their contracts the year after this, right? You don't have them locked into long-term bad money. Nikola Vucevic's contract also will be an expiring contract at the end of next year. Still got Zach LaVine's contract if you haven't found a way to move him by then. But at that point, you're moving towards an area where you're starting to get towards financial, more room financially, I guess is to say, under the cap, right? At that point, you haven't had to make any decisions on rookie contract extensions of Dalen Terry, Julian Phillips, definitely not Modest Bucilis yet at that point, right? And then even the player that you signed this offseason in Jalen Smith, you didn't really give him big time money. $9 million a year, that's not bad money. Now, you do have a big question to ask yourself in Josh Giddey at that point, because if for some, let's say that Josh Giddey does look like crap. I'm not, again, because I don't want to trigger any fans. This is not to say at all that this is what I expect to happen. This is to say that if these things happen, if Josh Giddey does look like crap for the Bulls next year, the Bulls very well could then say, hey, we can either sign, we want to sign you to see if you can continue to grow. Maybe it was a bad year. It's your first year here, but then you can lock him in for a more cap-friendly deal. Or if you just look at him and say, hey, Josh Giddey, it didn't work here. Yeah, you gave up Alex Caruso, who also would have been a free agent. You didn't get any long-term capital back. But at that point, you don't have to lock in Josh Giddey to a long-term contract, or you're probably going to get a favorable contract, much like you did with Ayo and with Kobe, considering at that point, you pair his last year with OKC and a potential bad year here, he's going off 2 bad seasons. So maybe you do get a more shorter but more team-friendly contract, as he and his agent probably don't want to lock him into long-term bad money if they believe he's going to be able to step up. So overall, the Bulls have put themselves in a place where they've taken a calculated risk. Either your young players step up for you tremendously, and you maybe miss out on a top 10 pick, but you have now young guys who have shown you that they are building blocks for your future, or it does not work out, and you keep your top 10 pick. Now, there's a third scenario in which we aren't quite sure. We don't bottom out. The young guys aren't great, but they're not bad either, and the Bulls end up being a team that ends up winning like 38 games, and then they miss out on the top 10 pick, and you have no answers either way. That's the worst case scenario by far. Like, to have players maybe take a bit of a step, but you're still not sure, and at the same time, but they've been too good to not keep your pick, but not good enough to where you feel confident in your future with them. Yeah, that'll be a Bulls type thing to do, and that's why it is a calculated risk. But and you look at either the most two likely scenarios is that either you're better than expected, and thus you've gotten there in a large part because of your young players stepping up to much larger roles, or you are worse than you hoped for, and you end up keeping your top 10 pick. It's a calculated place that this Bulls team is in, and it kind of, when you start looking at it that way, it makes sense that they made their move now. They made their move at the same time that aligns with them having a top 10 protected pick that could go out to the San Antonio Spurs. But the work's not done either way there, right? And that's where it gets into kind of the doubt around the front office, is that even if, let's say, this young Bulls team plays extremely well, better than most expect, they make the play-in, and they barely miss out. They aren't bad enough to keep their top 10 pick. But then you have to start, AK and Eversley still have to get to work then on, all right, now what do you do to start adding to this team, not take it away, but start improving the team? Because at that point, you don't have a draft pick that season. You haven't made any moves to get yourself an additional pick, unless you've moved Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic for something at that point. You have a little bit more cap flexibility than what you would have had you kept the team that you before moving off certain pieces of that team. So that's something you can look at as well there. But overall, that does not stop the front office from having to do their job of figuring it the hell out. Now, I will say this. The Bulls do have $56 million below the first tax apron next year. And we know that the Bulls treat that as a hard cap. So that would theoretically give them $56 million of flexibility. Now, because that's not true cap space, it means that they can't necessarily go out and just sign those players because they'll still be over the cap of $71 million. But it does mean you can use that trade player exception that you created in trading DeMar DeRozan, I think it's worth about $12 million, to bring in somebody and it not send you over the luxury tax. You have the ability to have a buffer in there to give a contract extension to a Josh Giddey, to a Dalen Terry if you decide you want to keep them, right? You have that built-in flexibility there that, okay, now the Bulls aren't like right up against the luxury tax like they were this year, to where you can barely breathe and you got to rob Peter to pay Paul. It gives the Bulls a lot more flexibility in that case if they want to try to add to the team. But again, that goes back to AK and Eversley having the mindset, and that's the place where some Bulls fans have the most doubt in. It's not necessarily about the roster and the individual pieces of this roster. A lot of Bulls fans have doubt, and their biggest doubts are in the people who are running the show and in head coach Billy Donovan, who I guess you can throw in there as well as somebody who's running the show. And as long as you have those doubts, you're never really going to feel quite safe in what your team is doing until the wins or whatever starts stacking up and you've done something sustainable over time. The Bulls had a great flash in the pan when they first built and put this team together. They don't really have that anymore, right? And so they had a little bit of faith from the front office, but that faith has been washed up by the years of inactivity and the fact that the Bulls have gotten worse year after year after year. So, that doesn't do anything for that. It's still going to take time for us to really start trusting this front office again. And that's not a bad thing, right? That's not a bad place to be in when your front office has, well, it's bad as a sense of a fan, right? But they have that opportunity to, and like I said, cap flexibility is coming. How are they going to use it is the bigger question. That's some place where we don't have the most faith in this front office. Billy Donovan's coaching, we don't necessarily always have the biggest faith in that, right? So even if you look at these players and say, we trust what these players are probably going to turn into or how they can develop, either way, that's even if the Bulls do bottom out, well, not bottom out, but let's say they do keep their top 10 pick. We still have to trust them then to make the right decision. Now, Manas Bucilis, as of right now, looks like the right decision. And I love the fact that I love everything about Manas Bucilis. Yes, he still has tons of things he needs to work on with his game. But as a player that is 19 years old and was projected to be a top 5 pick and we got him at number 11, I'm fine with where we sit right now with Manas Bucilis. And I'm excited about seeing how Kobe and Ayo are going to take this bull by the horns, lack of a better term, and really steer this thing and see where they're going to go. As paired with Josh Giddey, we still have tons of things to question, right? What is going to be the future of Zach LaVine and this Bulls team, and how much does Zach still being on this team hurts the forward progress of your young players that you're trying to turn the keys over to and give them? Because I tell you what, Kobe White is going to start. Zach LaVine is going to start, right, if they're here on this roster. And so you're still trying to figure that out. And maybe that glue guy is Josh Giddey with his ability to actually be a point guard. Is it more the most modern point guard with his ability to stretch the floor? No. But a lot of you guys, for a long time, and this is something that I love about Bulls fans, but I also got to talk about, is that for the long time, so many of you guys, we need a true point guard. We need a true point guard. We need a true point guard. We get a true point guard, and now all you do is complaining that he doesn't make threes. Jason Kidd didn't start making threes consistently towards the end of his career, right? And Josh Giddey is 21 years old, and he's gotten better from three every single year. Now, I won't say that his three-point shooting necessarily, the shot itself looks the most promising, even in Olympic play, but like at some point, we just got to realize as a fan base, we just going to complain about everything or anything. We're always going to find something to complain about until the team starts winning consistently. And to that point, I understand that in a lot of ways, right? Because what are we celebrating if we're not winning? That's what this is about. It's about putting a team together that can win and that can compete. Now, there's a process to get there, and we can't skip the process. Some Bulls fans want to skip the process, not to say the process like what Philly did. We're not going through that process, but it does take time. It's not as bad as make this move and boom, we're off to the races. That's what the Bulls tried to do with adding Vooch, with adding DeMar, with adding Lonzo. And it really set us back where we were basically right back at the place we were before we signed, before we traded, before we got those guys. And that's something that this front office, I really do hope learns from, is to learn from you rushing that process and now go through actual player development, drafting well over the course of years, and getting a team together that's drastically going to help this city, this franchise, actually get to the place that we all want to get to, and that's winning basketball. So let me know what you guys think, as always, on that down below. For those that don't know, I had nothing of that planned. Like, literally, I sat down to record this morning, and I had the thought in my head of, hey, we're taking a calculated risk. And everything that I just walked through was me literally walking you through my thoughts. Hopefully it made some sense. It is what it is. I like to do that every once in a while. I probably do that like once or twice a month where I just sit down, I turn on the camera, I turn on the mic, and I let the topics go where they go in my head. I think it keeps you sharp as a podcaster. I challenge all podcasters to try to do that from time to time, unless I'm just seeming like a crazy man, which I am a bit crazy, so that plays into it. But with that said, let's go ahead and get into the voicemail bag. We got a voicemail. This one's from Brian Washington.
Hey, what's up, Haize? Good work you're doing, man. I always congratulate you on your work, man. Your show is good. I like listening to you guys. Y'all bring all the latest updates when I can't find time to get in tune or catch up. I always come to your page and get everything. But I agree with you on the Stewart signing, man. That's a good move the Bulls made. But I also want to ask you, like, how do you feel? Because I'll give this Bulls team a chance, whether we trade Zach LaVine, whether we keep him, whether we keep Zach, and whether we keep Vooch, if they still on the team. It looks like a pretty good team, bro. And I'm going to give Zach LaVine a chance. Maybe, DeRozan was cool, and he kind of stepped back, took a little back seat to that. Maybe, hopefully, he stay healthy. Because Zach LaVine, he never had a bad season. He just can't stay fucking healthy. But just imagine these younger guys and a little bit more athleticism, because LaVine is athletic. You know what I'm saying? Dunk champ. He can jump out the gym. But I want to see how I don't mind seeing how he worked with these new guys, the younger team, more athletic, faster. Oh, he might thrive. He just might have a fucking breakout season himself. Even Vooch. If they play him right, it's all up to Donnie. It's all up to Billy. It always comes down to Billy, how he developed these players, these young guys, and how he play them to give them the minute. Patrick Williams should come out because Caruso ain't eating up those power forward minutes no more. You know what I'm saying? So I'm excited to see how these guys work, whether we have that boost or not. I think we got a pretty good team because I don't want to see no tanking shit. We tanked. We was trying to come out of that with DeRozan and them, so I don't want to see the Bulls actually tank. That's too many. We got enough young motherfuckers in the D-League, you know what I'm saying? We don't need to be tanking. We can just add, But I'm excited to see what this team can do with LaVine, Vooch, and these new younger guys. Just, look, fresh blood. You know what I'm saying? Look, fresh energy. What you think about that, man?
Listen, I get what you're saying with this, and I even get where you're saying that you don't want to see it tank, right? And the Bulls aren't tanking. I look at tanking very specifically as we are actively trying to be as bad as possible so that we can get have the best chance at the number 1 overall pick. And tanking generally doesn't work. I think people confuse tanking with rebuilding. Rebuilding doesn't always mean you're tanking. It may mean that you naturally are going to get better picks and be a little bit worse off because you are rebuilding and trying to find what pieces and players match and play together and that you can build with and on and things like that. But yeah, I don't think that the Bulls are tanking. But I do think a lot of Bulls fans are starting to get excited about seeing this young team develop and grow together and see what they can turn into, right? You, of course, have some that think this Bulls team can contend for a playoff spot. You have some that think that this Bulls team is going to struggle to win 30 games. Like I said, I sit somewhere in the middle of those two things. And it all depends on how this thing comes together and how these players really, as the word, congeal as a unit and start seeing how they can play together. And so, and then you mentioned a lot of Zach and Vooch. And ultimately, I don't think Vooch or Zach are long for this team if the front office can find deals and they can have their way. But then again, the market just may not be there to where you're just not moving on from those players because you may want to, but you just can't. And at that point, you got to ask yourself, how much is that going to hurt the Chicago Bulls? Either way, whether you look at it as saying the growth and development of the young guys, or you look at it and say trying to keep your pick in 2025, right? So we'll see. Like I said, I feel very confident from what we've heard, what we've seen, that this Bulls team, the moment they hear a deal that they feel is worth it to move off from Zach LaVine, they're probably going to move on from Zach. Now, Vooch is a different story. Like I said, I think in yesterday's episode, and that may have been me talking to the Cognac boys. I'm not sure. I record a lot, y'all. A lot. I've been dropping a lot of content here lately. I think I checked the numbers. So far in the month of June, we're 22 days in. I've dropped like 38 videos. So take that for what you will. But I think that when it comes to Vooch, because of having a center that still can get you a double-double, that they may not look at it as we got to actively shop him, but we're listening, seeing, monitoring what that market may be. And they may make a move at the trade deadline for Vooch as well. So we'll end up seeing what happens there. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following the channel at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number 1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is because of you guys. And thank you guys for supporting the channel. We are a little over 300 subscribers away from our long-term goal of 20,000 subscribers. What happens after we hit 20K? I have no idea. I never thought that we'd get here. So make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button, especially if you're new to the channel, you're finding us over the offseason. Hit the subscribe button. In exchange for that, I'll be giving you the best daily content that you're going to find for the Chicago Bulls on YouTube, on the podcast side. Nobody's dropping episodes 7 days a week like I am. They're just not. There were a few years ago, but it's just me, basically. Me and the Cognac boys. Shout out to the Cognac boys as well. So make sure you guys are tuned in and hit that subscribe button. But like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.